Good evening and welcome to this first edition of By PNG Made. The program is a joint initiative of MTV and the Manufacturers Council of PNG. PNG's manufacturing sector employs around a quarter of the formal workforce and contributes an estimated 6 to 11.5% of GDP. With PNG's rapidly growing domestic market, it is hoped that the manufacturing sector will get a boost. In this first segment, we take a look at the PNG Manufacturing Council's role, the importance of encouraging domestic manufacturing, and the challenges faced by this sector.
While Papua New Guinea is best known internationally as a source of gas and minerals, it also has strong manufacturing, agricultural, fisheries, and forestry sectors. From fabricated steel to coffee beans, from oil palm to canned tuna, from paint to designer furniture, it's all made in PNG. Making things in PNG or manufacturing has a direct relation with growth, output, and employment. The economy is said to be working well when its citizens are gainfully employed. There are a series of tasks involved in making a product possible, from design and concept to production, assembling goods, supply chain, and finally to taking the product to the market. All these processes involve employing people and providing them with essential training that enhance their capacities and instill in them work ethics and specialized skills. The Manufacturing Council came into being some 20 years ago to support local manufacturers and the value-added industries with both regulatory reforms and also to help promote the industry. It is a strong representative body which holds regular consultation between its members and key senior government departments and statutory bodies. The Council also deals with private sector organizations in negotiating better prices for the supply of goods and services. While the manufacturing sector has received a lot of support from the government, who has revised the trade and tariff policies, alleviating some of the problems that the industry is faced with, such as high cost of inputs, considerable amount of work still needs to be done in terms of infrastructure, education, and the like, which will help reduce production costs. The good news is that the government of the day is investing heavily into its key priority areas, such as infrastructure, health, education, and law and order, all of which will address these issues. But it is a medium to long-term outlook and one which will require us to see a stable government in place for the next few terms before we consider the platforms for conducting business in PNG to be comparable to those with which PNG is competing against.
The issue is the time frame. You can spend all of this money now, but it's going to take some years. It's a medium to long-term outlook before what you would consider to be the platforms for conducting your business to be comparable to those of which we're trying to compete against. And it's those interim solutions. So we're at a point in time now where I guess the underlying fundamentals and indicators of our economy are very strong, albeit that over this last sort of 12 to 18 months and possibly for the next 12 months there will be some contraction in our economy, and we've seen a reduction in the volumes, and some of those things are exacerbated by things like the foreign exchange issues at the moment. But the long-term outlooks are quite strong. The real issue is that we've got businesses in PNG that have been here for 5 years or 25 or even 40 years, and more than 40 years, that are almost running at a loss and that are going concerns. And it's getting very, very difficult for them to look at their shareholders and say, explain why they should continue to run at a loss, or to really put so much at risk for so little return when these competing countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, They're really rolling out the red carpet to try and attract. And even within the Pacific Islands, Fiji's aggressively reformed their tax system and their business environment to encourage multinationals and other businesses to come. So we've certainly got we've got the market. We've got a lot of challenges. We're doing some work, but it's going to take 5 years minimum and more likely to be in that 7, 10, 15-year window.
There is often a lot of pressure on the government to attract new investors into the country and create jobs, and as such provide lucrative fiscal incentives to all new players. But the Manufacturers Council feels that this could hamper existing investors, and the council is lobbying to the Tax Review Committee to maintain consistency in the manner in which the fiscal incentives are applied and make the process more transparent.
When it comes to taxes, I guess there's so much pressure on the government for every new investor to get some sort of a concession. That's the indication and acknowledgement that the platforms for doing business in our country is not conducive and favourable. We don't have really any investors that are coming in here saying, listen, we want to put in all of our money and we are going, particularly if you're talking about competing against a product that's made elsewhere or trying to get into export. In 8 years with the council now, there's really no new investments in that area for that reason that it's just so expensive and so difficult to do business. Everybody that comes here to do business has a requirement to say to the government, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to give us? Just so we can make some money but not be overwhelmed by the competition. It's a very, very difficult thing for the government because we acknowledge the fact that they need to attract new investment, they need to create jobs. But the unfortunate thing is that every time they're giving one of these concessions to a new player, they're significantly harming the people that are already committed and invested here. So what the Manufacturers Council has been sort of suggesting and lobbying, I guess, probably somewhat strongly to the Tax Review Committee and the government is to, one, have some consistency in the way in which they apply some of these, fiscal sort of incentives and I guess constraints. We'd like it to be more transparent, so things like access to tax credit schemes, should not just be reserved for people in there. Things like the dividend policy, if you're in the oil and gas sector, you're paying, between 15 and 0 and 10%, and if you're in manufacturing or other sectors, you'll pay 17. So that is a disincentive for people to get into those sorts of things, and so we're really calling on the government to not pick winners and not pick winners in sectors.
Despite the present difficult circumstances, there are existing investors, members of the Manufacturing Council, all of who are willing or have already increased their investment in PNG over the years.
We've got about 90 members of the Manufacturers Council, and I think you could say that nearly all of them have a desire to increase their investment in Papua New Guinea. And many of them have, both here in Port Moresby and in Lae. Most people would be hard-pressed to have not seen the massive investments by SP in terms of upgrading their brew houses and their production facilities. Goodman Fielder, Mainland Holdings, RD Tuna, NBPOL, KK Kingston, Coca-Cola. All of these companies, Pacific Industries, have ventured into, either new products, improve their lines. At Nestle, they've got Papua New Guinea is home to the most advanced and most efficient noodle packaging line in the world. Nestle is a global company. They're one of the leading, if not the leading, world food manufacturer, and their most advanced and most efficient noodle line is here in Papua New Guinea. So it's it's a testament, I guess, to both their willingness to remain here and their confidence, and also things like the rotomolded products that KK Kingston's is getting into, Monia with the concrete fabrication, Markham Culverts with some of their new techniques, are again indications of some of that, I guess, the private sector-led investment into new areas, and I guess also increasing their output in the current.
Welcome back. You're watching by PNG Made. We continue with our report on PNG's manufacturing sector and the challenges faced by local manufacturers.
While PNG has a large market for locally produced goods and has significant export potential, high costs mean that PNG cannot be competitive enough in the world market, and hence our exports are reduced to a select few specialized items of coffee, palm oil, and minerals, all of which are traded in the world market.
We have significant potential for export markets. The problem is that we just can't be competitive. If we have an example with Nestle at the moment where Nestle Australia would love to actually source their noodles from Papua New Guinea. At the moment they come from Malaysia. The irony is that you've got the Nestle, the most advanced and efficient noodle packaging line in the world here in Papua New Guinea. In Malaysia it's not as efficient. They both use wheat imported from Australia. So we have Goodman Fielders here mill the wheat to the requirements, fortify it. They have them doing it there in Malaysia. They both use palm oil from Papua New Guinea. The palm oil that Nestle buys from NBPOL to come to Lae is 50% more expensive than a Malaysian company to buy from Papua New Guinea. So it sounds stupid. How is it that you can actually pay 50% more for a locally made product here in Papua New Guinea than what it is for a foreign company? So the potential for those markets is significant, but because of these costs, and in that instance it's not because NBPOL is selling at a higher price to our market, it's because of our coastal shipping and domestic shipping. The prices are just completely non-competitive. Now if you go and talk to the shipping industries here, they'll say, well, that's because our costs are high, but that's the real problem there. The reason why when we have these MSG trade shows, Pacific Island trade shows, there's been I think probably 13 or 14 New Zealand trade delegations here in 3 years. We've had the Thais, we've had the Chinese, we've had the Europeans. Everybody's coming here because there's a big market here. There's interest in our products, but we really can't compete. So it's at this point in time it's significantly one way. We'll continue to see our main exports being around those natural resource areas. Coffee, of course, is a little bit unique, and palm oil because it's really a globally traded commodity. But the challenge is for us to increase more of our sales of higher value-added products. So instead of exporting green bean, we should be exporting, roasted coffee and other coffee products. Instead of exporting bulk crude palm oil, we should be trying to export finished packaged palm oil products and palm oil of a higher level of refinement and things like that, which is not done here because it's too expensive.
The growth of manufacturing in PNG has by no means been an easy path, with high cost of production leading to expensive end products that compete in the local market with cheap imports. The Manufacturing Council CEO, Shay Scovell, says that all Papua New Guineans play a vital role in helping support the local economy by buying PNG Made goods and supporting the local industry.
The things we're proud of with the Manufacturers Council and on behalf of all the manufacturers is that our members produce things locally for our people, and we also produce them locally for other people to have. Unfortunately, we've got a situation where everybody here, the majority of people, when they see the PNG Made logo, they recognise that logo, they understand that it means that the good is made here in Papua New Guinea. They are actually correct in their belief that a locally made good, a PNG made good, is of a higher or equal quality to many of the imported goods. We should also, things like PNG standards. A Papua New Guinea standard has equivalence with international standards. When you see somebody claiming that they've got something built even to an Australia or New Zealand standard or the British standard, and you have a PNG standard, the PNG standard is either higher or equivalent to those standards. When people see the PNG Made logo, they understand that. Unfortunately, when I go to the supermarket, when you go into a trade store, a wholesaler, you see people buying so many foreign products. And it is correct that quite often the foreign products are a little bit cheaper than what the locally made goods are. But what we really need our people to understand is that when you buy a PNG Made product, you're actually choosing to support our country. Because we all want jobs, we all want opportunity for ourselves, we want opportunity for our grandchildren, our children, but we won't have those opportunities unless we support our own country. So it's a difficult challenge, and we do acknowledge that sometimes choosing PNG Made means you're choosing a product that's a little bit more expensive. But in the same way that we all understand, you know, when I say that a business has a high expense, so does a household. We're all paying too much for our Easy Pay. We're all paying too much for our internet. We're all paying too much for our mobile phones. We're all paying far too much for our vehicles. We're paying too much for our petrol. We all have that high cost of living. So as individuals, we acknowledge that things are expensive. All of those things are required by a manufacturer to make our good. Whereas the people that we compare our cost of living to overseas, being able to buy milk for, you know, a few, you know, say maybe 30 or 40 toy for a little milk as opposed to us paying a kina, it's the same. So we've got to make that choice. If we want to improve our situation, at this point in time, we have to make that choice to buy PNG Made and make that choice to invest in our country.
PNG Made. One sees the sign on the store window, the label on your favorite biscuit, or the bright traditional designs embedded with the PNG Made label on your Coca-Cola bottle. The apparent message is, let's support local business, a kind of community boosterism.
Buying close to home may be more than a feel-good worth paying for more local matter. Research has shown how money flows and the profound economic impact of keeping money in town, and how the fate of many communities around the nation and the world increasingly depend on it. At the most basic level, when you buy local, more money stays in the community. The New Economics Foundation, an independent economic think tank based in London, compared what happens when people buy produce at a supermarket versus a local market or community-supported agriculture program, and found that twice the money stayed in the community when people bought locally. That means those purchases are twice as efficient in terms of keeping the local economy alive. Many local economies are suffering not because too little cash comes in, but as a result of what happens to that money. The NEF says money is like blood. It needs to keep moving around to keep the economy going, noting that when money is spent elsewhere, it flows out like a wound.
One of the problems why we are struggling with not having foreign currency in the country is because all our money is going out of the country. This is causing a lot of stress to many companies, manufacturing companies, who cannot get foreign currency in this country. It's important that we must start to buy from companies which are manufacturing goods and services in this country. In doing that, our kina would circulate within our own country. And also, we can build our companies so that, especially export companies, who will be able to bring a lot of foreign currencies into the country. So I want to appeal to our people, be patriotic, be nationalistic. Please buy from PNG manufacturing firms, and especially buy and support the PNG Made brands.
It doesn't help that around 85% of the products in the average Papua New Guinean grocery trolley are either imported or made by foreign-owned companies. PNG's rapidly growing domestic market is driving demand for locally produced products, from paint and printed goods to refined petroleum. Local production also caters to the business-to-business market, especially in the mining, petroleum and construction sectors. And local producers are increasingly finding new markets, particularly in neighboring Pacific islands such as Solomon Islands, Australia and New Zealand.
When we had the height of the PNG LNG construction phase, at the height of it, we had a lot of goods to bring into Lae and to export out of Lae using the port. Currently, where are the goods for us to utilize the port that we've invested 800 billion on? Until we grow the manufacturing sector in Lae, how do we explain the money that we spent in Lae? This is where we must utilize this huge investment we've made by building the manufacturing sector so we have more goods for export. So while I'm the Minister for Trade, Commerce and Industry, I want to look less at importing. I want us to look at import replacement. I want to look at growing our manufacturing sector so we can produce more goods, create more jobs, create more wealth, and at the same time export more goods to other countries from here, taking into account some of the competitive advantage we have, especially like the low cost of labor. Now that we are looking at driving the cost of power down using LNG gas-fired power stations, looking at more hydros, I think in the future PNG has a great potential to be a major manufacturing hub in the region. We are closer to Asia. We know Asia is, this century is the Asian century. They have a growing middle class. They're looking for goods, high quality goods, and we can produce a lot of high quality goods at a reasonable cost, and at a cost that's competitive with the rest of the world.
Why buy local? This question is best answered by Michael H. Schumann, author of the book Going Local. Going local does not mean walling off the outside world. It means nurturing locally owned businesses which use local resources sustainably, employ local workers at decent wages, and serve primarily local consumers. It means becoming more self-sufficient and less dependent on imports. Another argument for buying local is that it enhances the velocity of the money or circulation speed in the area. The idea is that if currency circulates more quickly, the money passes through more hands and more people have had the benefit of the money and what it has purchased for them. Simply put, more goes into input costs, supplies and upkeep, printing, advertising, paying employees, which puts that money right back in the community.
This is also critical to ensure that we build a more sustainable economy. We must get more value for what we produce. Instead of creating jobs and employment in other countries, at the moment up to 80% of our children who go to school and who are able to reach grade 12, they have no employment opportunity. Without manufacturing, without downstream processing, what are we going to do to all our children? With the school fee policy of the O'Neill Dion government, we will have a lot more students coming out of the education system who are trained to look for jobs, but there ain't going to be jobs for them. Without manufacturing industries in Papua New Guinea, without more PNG made products, we will not be able to create employment for them. The manufacturing sector in Papua New Guinea provides one of the greatest employment creation opportunities for our country. And this is something that our government under the leadership of the Prime Minister are really focused at doing.
There are two key reasons to support Papua New Guinean-owned companies. Firstly, profits stay in PNG. And secondly, jobs are created for Papua New Guineans.
And that's all we have for you tonight. We hope you enjoyed this first episode of Buy PNG Made. Until next week, remember that when you buy locally, the money stays in the country and the economy grows. Control moves from the boardrooms of distant corporations and back into the community where it belongs. I'm Leanne Jarari, and this was Buy PNG Made.